Stocks are mixed today as we go into an uncertain trade session with China. Minneapolis burns to the ground. Trump issues an executive order, or at least threatens to, against social media companies. My monitor pops up again because I keep forgetting to turn that down as I go. And China says we didn't do it. I'm Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Oh, what would the show be without technical glitches? It might be professional. Who knows? Who knows? It might not be a duct tape production for all we know here, but all I know is that it happens, but we still keep coming back to this more and more day after day. I'm Jay Edgar. This is Contemporary. We've got a ton to get to today. I mean, it is ridiculous how much the world has changed in the last 24 hours. And I don't know if there's going to be a Minneapolis to go back to. I'm debating whether or not to go back and take the day off right now and go take a look at some of the rioting right now. I kind of want to, but I also kind of don't have any backup to do so, but we will figure that out as we go. But before we get started, head on over to freedomscoop.com. Freedomscoop.com is going to be your one-stop shop for all of your news and commentary. Stephen Ignoramus is back with an Oh Nothing party again. I'll be checking that out a little bit later today. We've got me, we've got the R-rated conservative, we've got the generational gap, Freckles and Britt, and Wyatt made his grand return discussing philosophy with Anna Baltus. It is all this and more. You can go check out our merch over there. We got plenty of swag because who doesn't love swag? Go and check us out over there. So, starting out with stocks today, we'll look at the curve from yesterday and a couple of really good articles that came along with that. So, looks like we got back up above 25,000 again yesterday, which is incredible. We were just about sitting dead at the mark, but we are sitting up there at a very comfortable place right now. Stocks are mixed today, so we don't really know what's going to happen. But for the most part, right now, investors are banking on the fact that people are getting ready to go back to work. I know that the salons are open here. You can start doing dine-in at restaurants. I actually got off the phone with that yesterday because I'll be doing some takeout tonight. But if I wanted to do dine-in tonight, I could do that too. So once people are working, they're buying stuff, and people are buying the stocks of the stuff, places that make the stuff. So, like I said from the beginning, once people are allowed to buy, the stocks are going to go up. All right, but let's read it from an official source. This is from Investors Business Daily. Dow Jones today, futures mixed as U.S.-China declare Cold War. Facebook falls on White House threat. This is from Alan R. Elliott. Stock futures set up for a mixed start Thursday with the Dow Industrials, S&P 500, and the Russell 2000 poised to extend their rallies. Alexion Pharmaceuticals and Workday stretched out big early gains. Twitter and Facebook fell as the White House threatened restrictions. Boeing ran highest on the Dow Jones today as its restart gathered momentum. Dow Jones futures moved up 0.8%. S&P 500 futures traded 0.4% above fair value. NASDAQ 100 futures slipped 0.3%. On the stock market today, small caps once again outpaced the general action, with the Russell 2000 showing a 1.1% pre-market gain. A complete mix of factors drove action early Thursday. Boeing lifted the Dow up 5% and continuing to rebound as it restarts production of its grounded 737 MAX airliners. The Nasdaq saw some early strength from Alexion Pharmaceuticals, which soared 7%, and Workday up more than 5% on earnings. Zoom Video, Trip.com, and JD.com lagged at the bottom of the index. Alexion and Boeing were also up top on the S&P 500, along with Newmont Mining and Salesforce.com CRM, HP Incorporated, Twitter, and oil producer Apache were at the bottom of the list. Facebook slumped 1.7%, Twitter dropped 4.1% after the Washington Post cited sources saying the president planned to sign on Thursday an executive order that would strip social media companies of immunities conferred in a 1997 piece of legislation. The Trump directive seeks to embolden federal regulators to rethink a portion of a law known as Section 230, the Post reported. Current law allows tech companies to police their own content without fear of lawsuits related to comments, videos, and other content posted by users on their platforms. IBD 50 and leaderboard stock Facebook ended Wednesday in a buy range about 2% above a 224.30 buy point in a 16-week cup base. It has extended above a more aggressive handle buy point at 215.38. Thinly traded Titan Machinery soared 16% following a narrowly mixed quarter one. Aerospace components maker Triumph Group pounded out a 14% pre-market gain. The Berwyn, Pennsylvania-based outfit reported above forecast first quarter revenue and earnings, but withheld guidance. Lumber Liquidators nailed down a 10% pre-market gain after delivering mixed first quarter results. Shares ended Wednesday up more than 18% for the week after cracking key resistance level. Homebuilder Toll Brothers vaulted nearly 8% after reporting a fourth straight quarter of revenue and earnings declines on its second quarter results, but topping analyst estimates. Toll Brothers stock ended Wednesday 13.8% so far this week. Yeah, everyone ordered their houses, their brand new houses, back in December or November or whenever the hell they did. It was some rich guy's Christmas present to his wife to give her a brand new house or something. And then the COVID hit and nobody could afford to finish building that house and nobody wanted to go out to the construction site. So now that they're willing to go out to the construction site, their stock is going to go up. This is not rocket science, people. But this is going to be the stocks for the day. I'm really interested to see more about this Facebook thing. I've got the article on the stack here. We're going to talk a bit about that later on, but I actually want to see the legislation, look into that, and figure out what it does. So I'll probably look into that off camera, but it's interesting to me. All right, I've got one from MarketWatch here today, talking a bit about what the recovery might look like. This is from Mark DeCambre. The Dow just punched above an important line in the sand that may signal that a record high is next. The Dow closed above a key technical level that is viewed by market technicians as a signal that a new bullish trend may be at hand. The Dow Jones Industrial Average finished up 2.2% at 25,548 on Wednesday, with the market buoyed by optimism around the business reopenings after being locked down for the past several weeks due to efforts to curb the spread of COVID-19's pandemic. The Dow's rally on Wednesday afternoon represents a steady move towards retracing 61.8% of the 124-year-old benchmark coronavirus sell-off from its record high in February to a low late March. The blue chip benchmarks finish above 25,364.89 on Wednesday, indicates the market technicians that the new trend has been established and that the next move for the Dow may be eclipsing its record high put in on February 12th at 29,551.42. The breakout supports a full 100% retracement of the downdraft, so targets February's high, and the same will apply for the Dow Industrials. Katie Stockton, market technician and founder of Fairlead Strategies, told MarketWatch of the Dow's retracement, while also referencing the S&P 500's retracement, which was decisively cleared last week. Indeed, the S&P 500 and NASDAQ composite indices have both retraced at least 61.8% of their declines between February and March due to the economic impact of the coronavirus pandemic. The S&P 500's 61.8% retracement was at 2947.33, and it notched a close above the 200-day moving average above 3,000, also viewed by technical analysts as a bullish sign of momentum in an asset. Many Wall Street chart watchers who follow the Fibonacci or golden ratio believe key retracement targets for a rally from a significant low to a significant peak are 38.2%, 50%, and 61.8%. Retracements of 23.6% and 76.4% also seen as secondary targets. The Fibonacci ratio was made famous by a 13th century Italian mathematician known as Leonardo Fibonacci of Pisa. It is based on a sequence of whole numbers in which the sum of two adjacent numbers is equal to the next highest number. The ratio also referred to as the golden ratio or the divine ratio because it had been found throughout nature, including in the DNA double helix and proportions of the human body. Technical analysts have adopted the ratio to help map the ebb and flow of financial markets. The NASDAQ Composite's 61.8% Fibonacci retracement was met at 86.8779, and its 76.4% retracement is at 91.1944, according to FactSet data. So, I mean, of course, a 13th century mathematician's sequence is not going to tell us how the markets are going to react to the mainstream news outlets trying their damnedest to get everything to stay closed down. But I mean, the other side of it is that numbers don't entirely lie either. So this I know a lot of people in the live chat, because I read the live chat every day after I get off the air, a lot of people in the live chat do want to come out and say that they don't believe that this is going to happen and they believe that there's going to be another crash coming. But, I mean, when MarketWatch, who is a reliably lefty company, is saying that, hey, something looks really good here, you got to pay attention. At least you got to pay attention. All right, next one here from Fox. Deadly shooting near George Floyd protest as looting arson grip Minneapolis. This is from Edmund DeMarch over at Fox News. Protests in Minneapolis over the death of George Floyd took a dramatic turn for the worse Wednesday night as the city police responded to stores in the city being looted and burned, as well as a deadly shooting at a protest location. Multiple reports indicated that Mayor Jacob Frey reached out to Governor Tim Walz to deploy the National Guard to the city. The mayor's office did not immediately respond to Fox News seeking comment. Social media users posted videos on Twitter that showed burning businesses and looters entering a local Target store and making their way out with bags full of items. At least one group of armed men was seen outside a strip mall in Minneapolis on Wednesday night amid the looting. Protests in the city erupted Tuesday after video emerged of a police officer with his knee pressed against Floyd's neck while the man was lying in the street in custody. Protesters have called for the officers involved, 4 of whom have been fired, to be charged in his death. I don't disagree with that. The fatal shooting late Wednesday night was connected to a looting at a pawn shop. The Star Tribune reported the store's owner reportedly fired the shot. Police said one person was in custody. Max Nestorak, a reporter for the Minnesota Reformer, interviewed a group of armed men outside a tobacco shop who said they agree with the protests but not the looting. Yeah, that does seem to be what they keep saying. That's what they said in Ferguson, too. And I kind of do, too. I mean, this is definitely warranting of a protest. But why not take advantage of a good crisis as long as it's going on there? They said the police in the city have been overextended and they stopped at the tobacco shop because they were told the business owners were desperate to protect the store. These guys are out here with machetes, the shattered windows, trying to keep looters out because cops can't get in there, one of the armed men said. So I figured before there were cops, there were Americans, so here we are. Another armed man said, we definitely don't agree with the looting, but we do agree with the cause and the protest. Some commenters on social media worried that armed citizens could escalate the situation. Looting has been recorded at a Target store off East Lake Street, and an AutoZone was set on fire near a police precinct. Yeah, Brady Leonard of the No Gimmicks podcast actually just retweeted that, and I commented on it. Officers could be seen surrounding the precinct, but did not attempt to intervene in the looting. Earlier, some protesters skirmished with officers who fired rubber bullets and tear gas. In a repeat of Tuesday night's confrontation, one reporter posted an image on Twitter of a Minnesota state trooper taking cover after the sound of gunfire rang out from a nearby parking lot early Thursday. So, I mean, they are going to burn Minneapolis to the ground. It appears at this point, and they're not going to be satisfied until it's gone, which I don't know why you burn your own neighborhood. I really don't. And of course, as we go on, we're going to start hearing things about hired protesters, paid protesters, and we're not going to get all the facts out of it. We're going to get tons of conspiracy theories about it. But once again, going back to the Ferguson riots, why burn your own village? Because you're going to have to get back up and rebuild it. The insurance money's not going to cover everything out of this either. But this is between the people of Minneapolis and the state of Minnesota, so we shall see what happens there. And as I said yesterday, it is at least worth the arrest and investigation into whether or not this was a murder. Yes, I understand they got fired, but I don't really think that's going to be enough. But let's see what goes on here from the Daily Wire. I said from the Daily Wire. There we go. As Minneapolis burns, Ilhan Omar tweets in part, "Our anger is just, our anger is warranted." This is from Ryan Saavedra. As Minneapolis burned late on Wednesday over the death of George Floyd, Democrat Representative Ilhan Omar, who represents the district, fired off a series of tweets on the matter after previously condemning law enforcement for trying to disperse rioters, saying, "Our anger is just, our anger is warranted." On Tuesday, rioters damaged windows of police cars, sprayed graffiti at a police precinct, and were met with police in riot gear, who eventually fired tear gas at protesters, according to NPR News. Omar responded to the events by writing on Twitter, Shooting rubber bullets and tear gas at unarmed protesters when there are children present should never be tolerated. What is happening tonight in this city is shameful. Police need to exercise restraint, and our community needs space to heal. The violence and riots were significantly worse on Wednesday night, as numerous businesses were completely destroyed, stores looted, buildings burned to the ground, and other acts of violence were committed. During the violent riots, Omar tweeted, "I am heartbroken, horrified at the needless death of George Floyd, another innocent black man murdered by police in our community. Frustrated that we keep finding ourselves in this position as a city. Angry that justice still seems out of reach." So, I do have to ask the representative how she intends to keep people in some sort of check at this point. And I'm no fan of the police right now, especially given why this started here. But they do need to take some measures. I mean, they're there to serve and protect. So they do need to take some measures to make sure that the whole place isn't burned to the ground, that people have a place to come back to once all of this is over, and so the children don't get hurt by people from outside the community who are coming in and flooding into the city to help protest. I mean, I'm not going up there to protest, but even I want to go up to the city right now and just see what's going on at this point. So they've got to do something. There's got to be some sort of stick in there from the police to discourage or at least hold back some of the behavior, and a rubber bullet, that's about the only thing that I can think of, some sort of non-lethal force to go with it. Yes, I understand there are children around. The parents that are bringing their children into this war zone need to be held accountable too, because that is not right. If you're in Minneapolis, you need to be getting your kids out of there at this point. But of course, the people are bringing them out there so they can hide behind their children and say, "Oh, think of the children." All right. Next one here from The Guardian. Okay. Yeah, we'll talk about cookies later. Hundreds demand justice in Minneapolis after police killing of George Floyd. Police and protesters clashed in Minneapolis on Tuesday evening following a demonstration at the intersection where George Floyd was killed in an altercation with several police officers the day before. Hundreds of protesters gathered in the city to demand justice after Floyd, who was African American, was killed when a white Minneapolis police officer knelt on his neck as he lay on the ground during an arrest. Footage of the incident showed Floyd shouting, "I cannot breathe and don't kill me." A large and diverse crowd gathered at the start of the protest, with some carrying signs reading, "I can't breathe" and "Jail Killer KKK OPS," and chanting, "Prosecute the police." Activists had blocked traffic for several blocks in every direction, and the crowd spilled out into the streets. News helicopters hovered overhead. The Twin Cities have seen several consecutive years of protests against police killings of black men, and in one case, an unarmed white Australian woman, but the gathering Tuesday was one of the largest in the metro area has ever seen. When asked why they had come, most people spoke of the need for police accountability before inevitably turning to remembering Floyd's unheeded final pleas. "It could have been my son, it could have been me, it shouldn't be," said a protester carrying a sign saying, "Lock them up." A group of riders from the Vital Kings, a black motorcyclist club based in St. Paul, accompanied the protesters, revving their engines over and over, the ear-splitting noise reverberating off the concrete. "We wanted to make some noise for the crowd. This is my voice," one of the riders said. From the intersection, protesters marched through the neighborhood to a city police precinct, where a small but angry and persistent crowd faced off for hours with officers guarding the building. At the precinct, as the rain came down heavily, windows were damaged and squad cars sprayed with graffiti. Protesters threw water and milk bottles at the officers, shouting, "Pigs," and "How could you?" Police fired green tear gas and stun grenades to disperse the crowd approaching the station. Dozens of protesters gathered in a Target parking lot. Minneapolis police did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Floyd died late Monday night when officers responded to a call from a grocery store that claimed Floyd had used a forged check. Police said Floyd physically resisted officers while possibly under the influence of drugs or alcohol. In the video footage, witnesses can be heard shouting at officers, "Get off Floyd's neck," and one yells, "Bro, he's not even fucking moving." Another asks, "You're just going to sit there with your knee on his neck." In a press conference on Tuesday, Minneapolis police confirmed Floyd died in a short time after the medical incident, after being transported to hospital. They were able to get the suspect into handcuffs and realized that the suspect was suffering a medical distress, a spokesman said, saying officers. The Minneapolis mayor, Jacob Frey, apologized to Floyd's family on Tuesday morning, saying Floyd should not have died. For 5 minutes, we watched as a white officer pressed his knee onto the neck of a black man, Frey said. For 5 minutes, this officer failed in the most basic human sense. The FBI and authorities in Minnesota announced on Tuesday that they had investigated. The incident is being investigated by the FBI for possible civil rights violations. 4 police officers involved in the incidents have been fired, but still roam free. So, on this, and just, looking at this, seeing what's going on with this and everything else here, and this is a point where the police officer was in the wrong. I completely get to that. I stopped being thin blue line once I started hanging that flag up behind me. The day that flag went up, I was done being thin blue line because they're human just like everybody else. And some of the laws and some of the responses that they do is unjust. And like I said yesterday, conservative ink is probably already out there trying to find every single pack of bubblegum that Mr. Floyd had stolen in his life. Trying to find everything that they can do to paint this guy as a criminal. But, there's no... He never had a chance to face down a jury of his peers. This is one of the problems that I do have with police using excessive force in this. And this was excessive force. Over a forged check, my God. I do understand the need for police to have weapons for defense. I understand that. Because when you've got a raging meth head running at you and he feels no pain anymore, no amount of wrestling him to the ground is going to do anything. But over a forged check, come on. But this is something that I fear that we are going to be talking about for the first part of the news for the next 6 weeks. So there's going to be more and more coming out about this. All right, next one here from ABC. Trump says it's time for U.S. troops to exit Afghanistan, undermining agreement with the Taliban. President Donald Trump said it's time for all U.S. service members to exit Afghanistan, undermining his administration's agreement with the Taliban that stipulates any withdrawal below 8,600 troops to be based on conditions on the ground. His latest comments come as that deal, signed in February, endangered by a sharp spike in Taliban attacks on Afghan government forces, faces a precarious path forward. The militant group and Afghan government have agreed to a 10-day truce to reduce violence and to the release of hundreds of prisoners, laying the groundwork for peace negotiations nearly 3 months after it was scheduled. We're acting as a police force, not a fighting force. We are in Afghanistan, the president tweeted on Wednesday. After 19 years, it's time for the police, or for them to police their own country. Bring our soldiers back home, but closely watch what is going, and strike with thunder, like never before, if necessary. The peace deal between the U.S. and the Taliban called for a reduction in the number of American forces from about 13,000 to 8,600 by mid-July. At the height of the nearly two-decade conflict, there were approximately 100,000 troops in the country. A U.S. official told ABC News on Wednesday that the number of U.S. service members currently in Afghanistan is between 8,600 and 10,000, despite the president telling reporters on Tuesday that we're down to 7,000 some odd soldiers right now. A second official said the U.S. drawdown is well ahead of schedule and close to reaching that 8,600 number. The U.S. is set to withdraw all forces in 14 months if the Taliban also uphold their commitments to the agreement to sit with an Afghan national delegation for peace negotiations and to break ties with terror groups like Al-Qaeda. Any reductions under 8,600 will be conditions-based after the U.S. government assesses the security environment and the Taliban's compliance with the agreement, and in coordination with NATO allies and partners, said Chief Pentagon spokesperson Jonathan Hoffman during a briefing on Tuesday. But there is concern that Trump, who has pledged to end America's endless wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, will push for a quicker withdrawal or one that disregards those conditions on the ground. His public statements on Afghanistan followed a New York Times report that senior military officials were preparing to brief Trump this week about options for pulling troops out of Afghanistan, including an option for a full withdrawal before the U.S. presidential election in November. Can you imagine what they would say if Trump kept another campaign promise? That actually right there, getting everybody out of Afghanistan, may be just enough to tick me back up to the hold my nose and vote for Trump thing, because I am currently not going to do so. That might just be enough to tick me back up to that, because I mean, he ran on ending the wars, and he may very well do this. That might eclipse the Patriot Act re-signing. Probably not, but it might. Asked about a November target date for withdrawal, Trump said on Tuesday, "No, I have no target, but as soon as reasonable." The aftermath of the U.S. Taliban agreement got off to a rocky start with an escalation in violence by the Taliban against Afghan forces, domestic political squabbles, and an inability to agree on prisoner exchanges. However, there has been positive momentum in the last couple of weeks as the Taliban and Afghan government work toward face-to-face peace talks of their own. Over the weekend, the Taliban announced a 3-day ceasefire during the Eid holiday, and the Afghan government agreed to release 2,000 Taliban fighters held in custody. Earlier this month, Afghan government leadership also committed to a power-sharing agreement. Hoffman said these steps promising, but Hoffman called these steps promising, but refused to say whether current conditions on the ground would warrant a further drawdown from U.S. troops. Meanwhile, senior administration officials, including Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, continue to call for a reduction in violence. It's slim, but there's a possibility we could get out of Afghanistan, and that was one of the gripes that I had with the COVID crisis. I thought that was the reason that we stopped talking about it. Well, that and the fact that it was politically inconvenient for the mainstream media, but it was still going on behind the scenes, even with COVID going on. I thought once COVID hit, we were going to be in the Middle East forever. I really did. But it looks like something is happening with that. And I heard about this from Shapiro yesterday, and old Warhawk Shapiro wants us to stay over there forever, thinks that we need to stay over there till the end of time. And I got busy at work, otherwise I probably would have jumped up and tweeted something about that, because it needed to be said. But yeah, this is a possibility. Slim, but it's a possibility. All right, next one here. Black Lives Matter protesters storm freeway in Los Angeles. Police officer's rear window shattered. This is from Eric Quintanar. Fox News Los Angeles reports that dozens of protesters stormed the 101 freeway in downtown LA on Wednesday after reportedly meeting for a Black Lives Matter protest at the Hall of Justice. The protest was a demonstration against the death of George Floyd, a 46-year-old African-American man who died after a Minneapolis police officer pressed Floyd's neck to the ground with his knee. Aerial footage from Fox News Los Angeles shows some of the protesters surrounding a police car and hitting it, with one of them causing the rear windshield to shatter. During the incident, at least 2 people can be seen mounting the hood of a car, and one of the people appears to injure themselves after jumping off the vehicle as it drives away. The person who fell was later taken in an ambulance but appeared to be conscious as they were taken away. A video of the protesters attacking the police car was posted on Twitter by a Fox News LA anchor, Marla Tellez. ABC 7 reports that approximately 500 to 1,000 people participated in the protest at the Hall of Justice, but it's unclear exactly how many of these protesters later walked onto the freeway to block traffic. Fox News LA reported that the protest has continued on the surface streets near the freeway. As the Daily Wire previously reported, the death of George Floyd has drawn massive attention since a graphic video circulated showing an arrest officer kneeling on the back of a handcuffed suspect's neck while the person repeatedly says he can't breathe. 4 officers have since been fired for the incident, including the officer who pressed his knee on the man's neck. So, this is going to start going as far and wide as everywhere else in the world. I wouldn't be surprised if some of this stuff starts up in Madison or New York or various other places in the country. Maybe down in Orlando they'll start rioting. And One of my coworkers actually pointed this out yesterday because I said this is going to be Rodney King all over again. And she said, this is probably worse than Rodney King because as far as she knows and as far as I know, Rodney King is still alive. This guy died, so, I mean, we could start singing April 26, 1992 all over again, and we'd probably be right. Riots in the streets of insert city here. All right, next one here. Well, we talked about the protests. This is the first show in just about since I started doing contemporary where the lead story wasn't COVID. I think for the first 2 weeks when I started the show, we were leading off on presidential politics, and then every show led off with COVID from there on out. And now we're not talking about COVID in the beginning, but are you guys ready to talk about it? Because there's still stuff going on with that. All right, this is a tweet that I found right away yesterday while I was looking through some stuff here from the Pew Research Center. And I'm not going to expand the picture just yet, but we will expand that in a second. I want to read what they had to say because I want to show you how they tried to spin this. COVID-19 deaths have declined in Democratic congressional districts since mid-April, but remain relatively steady in districts controlled by Republicans. So, of course, the narrative out there is that Democrats and Democrat cities are getting a better handle on this quicker than those evil, evil Republican governors. Well, I don't know about you guys, but tell me what you see out of this chart here. So, Democrat-controlled areas. Yes, of course they're getting much, much better handle on things. And Republicans, those evil Republicans, are remaining flat. Never mind the fact that they barely had a third of the deaths that the Democrat districts had. Pew Research Center, take this advice from me. If you're going to try and sow a narrative of disinformation, don't come with receipts. This chart is devastating to your argument. All this does is shows that the Republican-controlled areas of the state, which they're trying to paint as evil, had a better handle on this from the start. But, oh, well, they're staying steady, and the Democrat-controlled areas are declining quickly. And who cares who controls what area? Just to be completely honest, as long as we're starting to get a handle on this, is the only thing that really matters out of this. But of course, because it's Pew, we got to play politics. So I just thought that was interesting. I thought that was a lot of fun to look at. Let's take a look at CNN. Coronavirus has killed more than 100,000 people in the U.S. in less than 4 months. This is from Faith Karimi. We talked about this number yesterday, and I've talked about it in various other platforms as well. But to be completely honest, that's not the reason that I pulled this article up. But I want to read a little bit from the beginning so we see where we're going. In less than 4 months, coronavirus has killed more than 100,000 people in the United States. It's as if every person has died in Boca Raton, or almost everyone in South Bend. But the first coronavirus-related death was reported in February. No one could have fathomed that, numbing the stream of grim news that followed. Since then, an average of nearly 900 people have perished every day from COVID-19. With social distancing rules keeping families apart, many of the sick died alone in hospital rooms as loved ones were forced to say goodbye through phone screens. Yeah, this is, this is just going on and framing the numbers and just basically your kind of regular CNN fear porn, but I wanted to take a look at something else here. So down here, there was another subpoint to this article that said change of behavior is more crucial than a vaccine. And remember, everything that we've been hearing, before we can get back to normal, or new normal as they keep saying, we need to have the vaccine. So this is the actual reason I wanted to read this article. The U.S. did not have to lose 100,000 people in the first 5 months of the coronavirus pandemic, according to an expert on viruses and biotechnology. I'm still skeptical of that number, by the way, just putting that out there. Better preparation and guidance could have helped lower the death toll, said Dr. William Haseline, president of the think tank Access Health and International. We already know how to control the virus in a big population. It can be done through human behavior, the former professor at Harvard Medical School told CNN's Anderson Cooper. It didn't have to happen if we had been prepared. Experts had worked with the U.S. Department of Defense and Homeland Security to plan and protect their country from bioterrorism, as well as from threats like the coronavirus. It was totally predictable that another coronavirus was on the way, Haseltine said. The mechanism exists, the stockpile, the drugs, he said. There was a hole in our safety net. China, New Zealand, and Australia have effectively dealt with the coronavirus outbreaks, bringing their cases down through testing, contact tracing, and isolation. The key to their success was a behavior change without the benefit of a vaccine or effective drug. So, what the writer is doing here is trying to say that change the behavior, do what we tell you to, or everybody's going to die. And if you don't do what we tell you to, you have the blood on your hand for 100,000 people, is the point of this article. But yes, of course, they did have to lead with gripping fear of the fact that yes, 100,000 people are now dead. And even though we have proof that people are dying with COVID rather than of COVID, but yeah. And now we're going to use this to try and control the population. All right, so that was where I went to that. Next one here from Fox. Michigan Governor Whitmer claims husband's reported boat request was a failed attempt at humor. This is from Morgan Phillips. Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer acknowledged Tuesday that her husband dropped her name while requesting to get their boat on the water ahead of Memorial Day weekend, though claimed her husband's comments were a failed attempt at humor. Whitmer's comments came... I read the transcript. This guy's got to be super dry if this was a failed attempt at humor. This was a name drop that went wrong. That went horribly wrong. Whitmer's comments came after her office initially pushed back against the story, saying they're not going to make it a practice of addressing every rumor that is spread online. A Michigan GOP state senator also said that her office had originally adamantly denied the claim that Whitmer's husband tried to use her position to convince a dock company to quickly get the family's boat on the water amid the coronavirus lockdowns. One moment here. However, during a press conference, Whitmer essentially confirmed the reported conversation happened, even though she claimed the comments were made in jest. My husband made a failed attempt at humor last week, checking with a small business that helps with our boat dock up north, Whitmer said at a press conference Tuesday. Knowing it would make a difference, he jokingly asked if being married to me might move him up the queue. There it is. Obviously, with the motorized boating prohibition in our early days of COVID-19, he thought it might get a laugh. It didn't. Whitmer further sought to distance herself from her husband's remark. To be honest, I wasn't laughing either when it was relayed to me because I knew how it would be perceived. He regrets it. I wish it wouldn't have happened, and that's really all we have to say about it, she continued. Whitmer, who recently confirmed she's been in talks with the presumptive Democratic nominee Joe Biden campaign about being chosen as his running mate, famously imposed one of the strictest lockdowns in the country, sparking frequent protests. What's more, she's told people not living in northern Michigan, the only region in the state where the lockdown has been lifted, to stay away from vacation spots there during the holiday weekend. And the rest of this, for the most part, we read yesterday. But I guess my question here, first off, there is a motorized boating restriction going on in the state of Michigan. She said this right now. And even if the dude said this in a joking manner, with a motorized boating restriction in the state of Michigan, why was the husband even calling the dock company? Why? This just sounds like a big old cover-up, but I think we all knew that already. I got a pretty smart and pretty great audience here, and I'm pretty sure that they all knew that this was an attempt at rules for thee and not for me that went badly, and somebody ratted them out. All right, next one here from CNN. Salvadorian leader says he takes hydroxychloroquine. This is from Tatiana Arias over at CNN. Salvadorian President Nayib Bukele said Tuesday he uses hydroxychloroquine, the anti-malarial drug touted by U.S. President Donald Trump, as a potential coronavirus cure, even though international health experts have questioned the efficacy and have warned of harmful side effects. I use it as a prophylaxis, President Trump uses it as a prophylaxis. Most of the world's leaders use it as a prophylaxis, said Bukele during the press conference with U.S. Ambassador to El Salvador, Ronald Johnson, to announce a U.S. donation of 250 ventilators to the Central American country. Sometimes what's recommended to the people is something different than what's recommended to the leaders, because I've recommended to use hydroxychloroquine as a prophylaxis and the probability of this harming you is very low, Bukele said as he displayed the bottle. Bukele, 38, did not say how much he was taking or if the drug was prescribed by a doctor. And of course, now we have to go down into the safety precautions because these horrible side effects that we never knew about because nobody's ever taken this drug before are out there. People could die because they're taking hydroxychloroquine, which, I mean, to me, yes, you should absolutely still be 100% conducting with your doctor before you take any drug for any reason. Consult with your doctor. He knows your body. He knows how your drugs will react with the other drugs that you're taking right now, and he knows what's going to be best for you. So, yes, always consult your doctor on drugs, but this is something we have had around for decades, and we know, I mean, it's easy, it's cheap to make, we know what the side effects are, we know what the risks are. So, the mainstream's obsession with trying to put this down right now is just, it is appalling because this has been used everywhere, forever. And yet now they still want to tout this as some sort of mass evil because somebody's taking it and he might get grandma killed because he might convince her to take it. There's one easy way to keep grandma from getting killed from taking this, and even that is not 100%, I will admit that, but consult your doctor before taking any prescription medication. Period. End of discussion. That is the most effective way to keep a drug from killing you. Is consult your doctor. And even doctors get it wrong sometimes because they're human. But they can be held to account. Whereas if you die because you just took it up off the store shelf, nobody can be held to account for that. So that's my take on that. Alright, I got one over here from Politico, and this came to me from my cousin. He Facebook messaged this over to me here. And I wanted to read it here just to talk about a bit about this, because this is something he and I talked about this, because I've got a small business plan in the back of my head, and I'm kind of looking for investors right now to see if I can get it up off the ground. But he and I had a good long conversation about the regulations that went to, because he works in the industry, and then just because he and I were talking about this, he brought this to my attention. Something isn't right. U.S. probes soaring beef prices. 100 years ago, U.S. antitrust prosecutors broke down monopolies on meatpacking, but can they do it again? This is from Politico. This is from Leah Nyland, by the way. Supermarket customers are paying more for beef than they have in decades during the coronavirus pandemic. But at the same time, the companies that process the meat for sale are paying farmers and ranchers staggeringly low prices for cattle. Now the Ag Department and prosecutors are investigating whether the meatpacking industry is fixing or manipulating prices. The Department of Justice is looking at the 4 largest U.S. meat packers, Tyson Foods, JBS, National Beef, and Cargill, which collectively control about 85% of the U.S. market for the slaughter and packaging of beef, according to a person with knowledge of the probe. The USDA is also investigating the beef price fluctuations, Ag Secretary Sonny Perdue has confirmed. That seems like a conflict of interest, somebody with the last name Perdue as the Ag Secretary. But I don't know if he's related or not, that doesn't seem like a very common name. Meat packers say beef prices have spiked during the pandemic because plants are running at lower capacity as workers fall ill, so less meat is making its way to shelves. The 4 companies didn't respond to requests for comment about the probes. But the coronavirus crisis is highlighting how American system of getting meat to the table favors a handful of giant companies despite a century of government efforts to decentralize it, and it's sparking new calls for changes in meatpacking. It's evidence that something isn't right in the industry, said Senator Grassley, who has spoken out against mergers in the agricultural industry. In April, Grassley requested federal investigations into market manipulation and unfair practices within the cattle industry. So have 19 other senators and 11 state attorneys general. The average retail price for fresh beef in April was $6.22 a pound, 26 cents higher per pound than it was the month before, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. At the same time, at the end of April, the average price for a steer was below $100 per 100 pounds. The 5-year average for that same week was about $135 per 100 pounds, according to USDA's weekly summary. Ed Greenman, general manager at Upper Iowa Beef, who formerly headed the Iowa Cattlemen's Association, attributed the consumer price increase to plants running at lower capacity. At the same time, farmers and ranchers desperate to offload their cattle as they reach optimal weight for slaughter are cutting prices so they won't have to kill the animals without selling them. I'm running at half speed, Griman said at an event hosted by the Nebraska Cattlemen's Association. Cattle are backing up because we can't run our plants fast enough. Nothing is functioning properly. We need to be careful not to put blame on any one thing or part of the industry because we can't get these plants going. The industry has long been a focus for government antitrust enforcement. Exactly 100 years ago, after years of litigation, the 5 biggest U.S. meat packers, which were responsible for 82% of the beef market, agreed to an antitrust settlement with the Justice Department that helped break their control over the industry. And this is going to be a problem, and I want to see what the investigation does because this actually may garner support for the kind of industry that I want to build. I've looked at the idea, and I've looked at the fact that there are a lot of people out there who do not have access to a lot of things. I know a girl, and I was talking to her, and her dad, actually, he goes out and gets a bunch of pigs for people, gets them up, gets them slaughtered, processed, and resells them out for people so they can have their whole pig, their half pig, or whatever the hell else that they go out and get. And I've seen a lot of calls on social media for people that want to go out and buy a half a cow or a half a pig or various other large volumes of meat. Excuse me. And I thought to myself, and I know that they're small meat processing plants that's what they do is a lot of them, like your local meat markets will come out and say that they process deer. My local meat market will do that. They process deer, but many fewer of them process livestock animals. For the most part, like the article says, the animal will go to like Tyson or Cargill or something to go and get processed. And then they'll send the bigger cuts down to the meat markets where they'll custom cut them to the needs that they need. So it's not hanging quarters anymore. My thought to that was, if I could get together with a slaughterhouse and open up a small business like that where I could process down, where I could be a local competition to like a Cargill or something like that. People will buy local if they're given the opportunity. Because of volume, I don't know if I could undercut Cargill's prices, but of course, if they're padding their pricing because of the coronavirus pandemic, whether legal or illegal, maybe I could undercut them as well, but that's something to look forward in the future. But I mean, people even pay extra for something that's locally processed. I know they will. I hear them talk about it all the time. Because local is always better. I mean, it costs a little bit more for me to go to a local meat market than it does to go to the supermarket for my meat. And yet I'll still do it because I'm supporting a local business, I'm getting better quality stuff, and local is always better. But that is something that I'm planning to do, and I mean, this article here just kind of pushes me back into that direction. So I'll be looking out trying to find some investors to try and do that. And I would encourage people around the country to do the same because, I mean, if I'm going to be local, I can only service one region. So other regions are going to need service too, and I think that there is a market for this. And the way that the coronavirus affected the meat market, I do think that there's a market for this. All right, next one here from the Daily Wire. China now claims coronavirus probably did not come from wet markets. Virus not found in animal samples there. The Chinese Communist Party has reported this week in state-run media that Chinese scientists are now leaning towards believing that the coronavirus pandemic that has ravaged the world did not originate in the Hunan seafood market in Wuhan. The Global Times, which is the Chinese state-run propaganda, said that while the original theory that China publicly promoted was that the coronavirus originated in the wet market, new evidence indicates that the speculation may not be right. The Global Times reported, U.S. Army come in, they plant coronavirus. The article from the Chinese state-run media did not suggest any other potential places where the coronavirus might have originated. Most U.S. intelligence agencies reportedly believe the virus escaped from the Wuhan Institute of Virology during a lab accident there sometime late last year. The Saturday Telegraph, which is an Australian publication, reported earlier this month on a 15-page dossier compiled by Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance, which is comprised of intelligence agencies from the United States, United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, and New Zealand. And there's a pretty lengthy article there. It's pretty dry out there, but Yeah, I know China came out and tried to say that, yes, this came from the wet market. And I think that it may have been a step in there, but, Styx is probably right. It was probably some guy got bit by a bat that they were studying for the coronavirus, and it went through his glove, and he got it. He didn't tell anybody because they take a very dim view of lab accidents in China, and he didn't want to either get killed or fired, so he just didn't say anything, and now here we are. That seems to be Occam's razor's most reasonable explanation for what happened. And, I mean, he possibly could have gone to the wet market and just breathed on a bunch of people, or any number of other things that could have happened in China. They're packed in pretty tight out there. So for something that spreads person to person, airborne, whether droplet or aerosol, the writing's on the wall. All right, next one here from Fox News. Twitter's Jack Dorsey fires back at Zuckerberg, defends fact-checking Trump tweets. This is from Joseph A. Wolfson. Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey fired back at Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg, who criticized the tech giant's decision to fact-check President Trump's tweets about mail-in voting. In a preview clip of his interview with Fox News' Dana Perino, Zuckerberg weighed in on the escalating dust-up between Trump and Twitter. The issue at hand was the labeling of the president's tweets, sounding the alarm on potential voter fraud in the upcoming election, pointing to fact-checkers that say there's no evidence that expanded nationwide mail-in voting would increase fraud risks. Twitter's own analysis was later scrutinized by critics. "We have a different policy than this, I think. Twitter on this," Zuckerberg told the Daily Briefing in an interview scheduled to air in full on Thursday. "I just believe strongly that Facebook shouldn't be the arbiter of truth of everything that people say online," he added. "Private companies probably shouldn't be, especially these platform companies, shouldn't be in the position of doing that." In a late-night Twitter thread, Dorsey refuted Zuckerberg's comments while defending Twitter's head of site integrity, Yoel Roth, after his hyper-partisan anti-Trump tweets were discovered in the wake of the politically charged debate over Trump's tweets. "Fact check, there is someone ultimately accountable for our actions as a company, and that's me," Dorsey began. "Please leave our employees out of this. We'll continue to point out incorrect or disputed information about elections globally, and we will admit to and own any mistake we make." He continued, "This does not make us any arbiter of truth. Our intention is to connect the dots of conflicting statements and show information in dispute so people can judge for themselves. More transparency from us is critical so folks can clearly see the why behind our actions." I can't cross my fingers for shit. I don't know if you guys picked up on that's what I was trying to do there, but I can't cross my fingers for shit. Citing the platform's civic integrity policy, Dorsey explained that Trump's tweets may mislead people into thinking that they don't need to register to get a ballot. Only registered voters receive ballots, adding that we're updating the link on Donald Trump's tweet to make it more clear. So yeah, the social media guys are getting in a fight, but I know that I'm pretty sure that Zuckerberg doesn't want to be under the EO that's coming, which we'll read about that next. Zuckerberg wants free reign to go out and continue to sell your information as fast as he can for as much as he can. And if the government is looking into this, or there are lawsuits that have the ability to be filed against him, that kind of puts a damper in his key way of making his money. All right, next one here is from CNN. Trump is set to announce an executive order against social media companies. President Donald Trump is set to announce an executive order against social media companies on Thursday, White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany told reporters aboard Air Force One on the return flight to Washington following NASA's aborted SpaceX launch. McEnany did not specify what the order would include, but it signals the most significant step the president has taken in his war with tech companies as they struggle to balance freedom of speech with growing problems of misinformation. On Tuesday, Twitter applied a fact check to two of Trump's tweets, including one that falsely claimed mail-in ballots would lead to widespread voter fraud. CNN, you're supposed to be objective in this. I do understand that they're using your reporting to fact check, but yeah, this is an op-ed piece. Trump immediately shot back, accusing the social media giant of censorship and warned that if it continued to offer addendums to his message, he would use the power of the federal government, those are scary words, to rein it in or even shut it down. It is not clear what constraints the president would be able to apply to social media companies through executive order. Regardless, the move raises the stakes in Trump's battle to win with Silicon Valley and highlights what he believes is a fight worth having. In many ways, the latest episode with Twitter feeds Trump's narrative that there are powerful forces in the media aligned against him and that his is the only voice his supporters can trust. This plays right into President Trump's hands, said Jason Miller, the communications director for Trump's 2016 campaign, and someone who has been directly involved with Trump's social media strategy. They basically handed him a massive gift. Many of Trump's political allies rushed to his defense on Wednesday. Twitter is engaging in 2020 election interference. They're putting their thumb on the scale, says Florida Republican Matt Gaetz, a loyal Trump supporter and surrogate, during an appearance on the Steve Bannon-produced podcast War Room Pandemic. Steve Bannon-produced podcast. They didn't need to put that part in there. They could have just said podcast. The notion that they would outsource fact-checking to people who've been wrong about everything is an insult. Trump campaign manager Brad Parscale said this team no longer pays for advertising on Twitter and accused the tech giant of purposely influencing the election to hurt the president. We always knew that Silicon Valley would pull out all the stops to obstruct and interfere with President Trump getting his message through to voters, Parscale said in a statement. Partnering with the biased fake news media fact-checkers is only a smokescreen Twitter is using to try and lend their obvious political tactics some false credibility. The president made the decision to warn Twitter despite the fact that the company and most other prominent social media platforms have allowed him and his associates to peddle unsubstantiated conspiracy theories with few constraints. Jesus fucking Christ. This is CNN, folks. This is fair and objective and balanced right here. While Twitter added to the fact check to Trump's tweets on mail-in voting, it did not do so on any of his recent tweets, baselessly suggesting MSNBC host Joe Scarborough was somehow involved in the death of a former aide, despite a plea from the aide's widower to take the tweets down. Yeah, I haven't even covered that story because it's just too stupid and ridiculous. 45th President of the United States said a bunch of stuff. Alright, I can't read this anymore. I'm going to puke if I keep reading this. Alright, next one here from the Daily Wire. Read it. House Republicans sue Pelosi for defying 231-year constitutional tradition with proxy voting. Pelosi responds. This is from Eric Quintanar. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy filed a lawsuit against Speaker Pelosi on Tuesday in an attempt to block the House of Representatives from allowing representatives to vote on behalf of up to 10 other members of Congress as a designated proxy voter. In addition, McCarthy, nearly 24 Republican members of Congress have signed on as plaintiffs to the lawsuit, which also names the Sergeant-at-Arms of the House Clerk, two figures who serve a notable role in the proxy voting plan, as defendants. I just filed a lawsuit in federal court to overturn Speaker Pelosi's unconstitutional proxy voting scheme, tweeted McCarthy on Tuesday evening. It could allow as few as 20 representatives to control the votes of 220. This is not the representative democracy of our founders envisioned or what our Constitution allows. The lawsuit states that so far 55 members of Congress have sent letters to the House Clerk designating another representative as their official proxy voter. As of Tuesday evening, an additional 4 members of Congress officially designated another representative as their proxy, bringing the total of 59 members, all of whom were Democrats. Of course they were. The lawsuit, a copy of which was posted by the New York Times, accuses the majority of ignoring what the Constitution demands of it and asks the court not to do the same in its ruling. Yes, once again, of course, we have technology to make it so they don't have to be in the room with each other if they don't want to be in the room with each other. And I mean, I wouldn't want to be in a room with 3/4 of the people that are in Congress right now. But if they're so scared of the pandemic, we have the technology to do this. Why don't we push for the technology to make this available for people to vote from their home districts rather than putting proxies into place? I understand that Nancy Pelosi comes from a time before technology, but still, Let's look at that before we do something that's going to cause pandemonium in the House. But that's what they had to say on that. I know we reported mostly on this yesterday, but yeah, the lawsuit is coming up, and we're going to get another decision out of the Supreme Court over the gray areas of the Constitution. We will get a concrete decision on some of the gray areas. So, all right, next one from the Washington Examiner. 1,486 ads blocked. Wow. Kathy Griffin stabbing Trump with a syringe containing nothing but air inside would do the trick. This is from Anthony Leonardi. Kathy Griffin advocating plunging an air-filled syringe into President Trump, reacting to a tweet from CNN White House correspondent Jim Acosta that Trump pondered whether or not he should be given an insulin regimen at a White House diabetes event. On Tuesday, the comedian said syringe with nothing but air inside would do the trick. Fuck Trump. And this, of course, is responding to something that came from Jim Acosta, who needed to have attention drawn to him. You know, Jim Acosta. He tweeted something other than, "Look at me, I'm Jim Acosta. Look over here, look at me." In medical procedures, air accidentally injected into the body's bloodstream through syringes or IVs can cause air embolisms, which can be fatal. Within moments, Twitter users were remarking how Griffin can expect another visit from the Secret Service, because she's already had one. Griffin stirred controversy in 2017 when she held up the bloody prop of Trump's severed head in a photo shoot, a move that disrupted her career and prompted a visit from the Secret Service, according to her lawyers. "I don't think I'll have a career after this," Griffin told reporters in tears after the photo became public. "I'm going to be honest, he broke me." You were broken for a long time before this. I've seen your comedy. In response to a Washington Examiner tweet for this report, which noted that stabbing someone with a syringe filled with air could be fatal, Griffin said she sure did advocate for the president to be stabbed with such a device. Griffin ended her quote tweet with "Trump lied, people died," a common social media hashtag used by the president's critics for blaming him for a poor response to the coronavirus pandemic, which has been tied to nearly 100,000 deaths in the United States. The Washington Examiner reached out to the Secret Service about Griffin's tweets. The Washington Examiner also asked Twitter if she breached the platform's violent threats policy. A representative of the company said, "We'll look into the tweets." This sounds just like the Dorsey interview with Rogan and Tim Pool. "That's a problem, Tim, and we'll look into that." All right. That's enough of that there. Yeah, Kathy Griffin is off the rails. And, of course, if it had been anybody else. Once again, that's the biggest thing. Any kind of news like this, swap the parties. Imagine what this would have been if this would have been somebody with Barack saying the same thing. Their lives would be over. But because it's Kathy Griffin and it's Trump, it's okay. All right, I've got one more here, and then we'll do a thing that I like and a thing that I hate. So, mysterious continuously active object discovered in Jupiter's orbit. This is from Chris Siacha over at Fox News. A mysterious continuously active object known as the Trojan asteroid has been discovered in Jupiter's orbit, making it the first known object like it. The object, known as 2019 LD2, has a comet-like tail made up of gas and dust. It was first observed by the University of Hawaii's Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System telescope in June 2019. 1 month later, an additional set of observations by Atlas strengthened the case it could be a Trojan asteroid. In April 2020, when it reappeared, additional routine Atlas observations confirmed it still looks like a comet, which indicated to researchers it's likely been continuously active for almost a year, researchers noted in a statement. "We have believed for decades that Trojan asteroids should have large amounts of ice beneath their surfaces, but never had any evidence of it until now. Atlas has shown that the prediction of their icy nature may well be correct," said Alan Fitzsimmons, who helped identify the object in a statement. "Earth has one Trojan asteroid, and Neptune has dozens. According to the release, Jupiter has hundreds of thousands, but it's likely that they were captured billions of years ago and are not active like 2019 LD2 is. It's unclear what caused 2019 LD2 to show cometary behavior, but the researchers have a few theories, including one suggesting it collided with another asteroid. Further research is needed to determine what caused the activity, but researchers are excited by the discovery nonetheless. Even though the Atlas system is designed to search for dangerous asteroids, Atlas sees other rare phenomena in our solar system and beyond while scanning the sky. Atlas Project co-principal investigator Larry Deneau said, "It's a real bonus for Atlas to make these kinds of discoveries." So that's kind of cool. We're starting to extend our range and be able to see far beyond just the asteroid belt, and even beyond that. We're actually able to sit back and study phenomena outside the asteroid belt and possibly even outside the solar system. I know we just, a couple months ago, we read an article about a Goldilocks zone planet not too far away from us that could support life. So there's other stuff to talk about. Absolutely is. All right, now we're going to do a thing that I like and a thing that I hate, and we're going to get on out of here because I'm hungry. All right, thing that I like today. From the Today Show, SpaceX launch is scrubbed. They only have video on this. That's lame. I don't want to play the video. Within minutes to go until liftoff, Wednesday's Dragon crew mission to send 2 astronauts into orbit from Cape Canaveral was scrubbed due to weather during the final countdown. NBC's Tim Costello looks at the drama behind the scenes in depth for today. So let's have a listen to this.
The air at the Kennedy Space Center was thick with humidity and excitement. Astronauts Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken suited up for their historic trip on a SpaceX rocket, stopping to wave goodbye to their families on their way to the launch pad, both of their wives also astronauts. Then into a white Tesla for their journey to Launch Pad 39A.
Oh, say, can you see?
A socially isolated Kelly Clarkson sang the Star-Spangled Banner as millions tuned in around the world. Thousands more lined the Florida coast to watch the launch in person.
History is happening, and we just like to be a part of it.
At 2 p.m., Hurley and Behnken strapped into their Dragon space capsule to make history. The president and vice president arrived for the first manned mission from U.S. soil in 9 years. But then, just 17 minutes before launch, with rain, wind, and lightning nearby, SpaceX Mission Control finally pulled the plug.
We continue to violate a couple different weather rules that we now do not expect to clear in time to allow for a launch today. We'll go ahead and end today's launch attempt.
It wasn't worth taking a risk with the lives of 2 American astronauts on the line.
In Dragon SpaceX, unfortunately, we are not going to launch today.
We appreciate that and understand that everybody's probably a little bit bummed out. It's just part of the deal.
We waited around for the weather to clear out, but ultimately it's about safety, so we want to make sure that it's the right time to make it happen.
Hurley and Behnken had been in isolation since March.
All right, so that's what happened there, and the fact that they delayed it is not the thing that I like. The thing that I like is that we're actually doing this. We're taking this initiative, and we're getting to the point. Because it's time. It's time to go back. And it's time to let the private industry into this. That's the part that I love about this most of all, is the fact that the private industry is getting a chance to come in. And I know it's a juicy government contract, but look at what we can do with a government contract. Where capitalism can come out and take the lead, where the government can no longer do. This is incredible. We're going to go back. We're going to go back and see space again. The space race is going to be on. And once we start exploring, who knows what could come next? Interstellar travel? Maybe. Maybe not in my lifetime, but maybe it could still happen. We're getting close to what they called the time for the first warp flight from Star Trek. We're getting very close to that. So if Roddenberry is a visionary or a seer of anything, we might get to that point in our lives. Maybe we won't. Maybe we will. But the fact that this is going to happen and the private industry is going to be involved, that's the thing I like today. I think that is awesome. And thank you to Elon for making this happen. And may Boeing give you competition and help you improve your product even more. All right, now let's do a thing that I hate. So, going back to the Twin Cities thing, I saw something that was floating around Twitter yesterday, and I threw up in my mouth as soon as I saw it. It was the most disgusting thing that I saw. The question, fact checked by Snopes, is this ex-Minnesota cop Derek Chauvin wearing a Make Whites Great Again hat. Chauvin is the former Minneapolis police officer identified in news reports as the killer of George Floyd. And they marked this as miscaptioned. Claim, a photograph shows former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin wearing a Make Whites Again hat. And of course, they're not rating this pants on fire because it would have fit the narrative. But, yeah. On May 2020, a Minneapolis resident, George Floyd, died after a police officer identified him in news reports as Derek Chauvin pinned Floyd down, kneeled on his neck, and choked him. The incident, which was captured by a bystander's now viral video, stirred anger, and citizens once again took to the streets to protest police violence and racial injustice. Chauvin was fired on May 26 along with 3 other officers. The outrage swirled, so did online rumors, along with the video allegedly showing Chauvin on stage at a Trump rally, fact-checked here. Social media users shared a photograph supposedly showing Chauvin in a Make Whites Great Again hat while picking a blackberry out of a fruit bowl. But the man in the Make Whites Great Again hat above is not Chauvin. This photograph actually shows Jonathan Riches, a supporter of U.S. President Donald Trump, who is also a former federal inmate and an online troll, who has garnered a reputation for filing lawsuits. Riches confirmed that he's the person in this photograph, but claimed that Make Whites Great Again slogan on the hat was photoshopped. So, and yes, I mean, you can look at it and you can clearly see that it's photoshopped. This is disgusting on 2 levels. The fact, of course, that the mainstreams are out there trying to stoke the fires out of this with anything that they can do to try and show Chauvin as a white supremacist or as a Trump supporter. Anything that they can do to try him to racism at this point. And clearly, yes, there was a major problem with the fact that he went out and he kneeled on the dude's neck. I don't know if racism came into it. I have no idea. It's possible. The only person that knows that for sure is Chauvin. But the fact that they wanted to Photoshop this hat on somebody that looked like Chauvin, and the fact that yes, they're trying to claim that he was at the Trump rally. This is just disgusting beyond disgusting. A crime of white on black is a problem, especially when it involves a police officer. Yes, that's a problem. But not everything is attributed severely to racism like this. But all you're going to do is, well, I'm sure what you're planning on doing, going out there and trying to make sure that you get as much damage and as much press coverage out of Minneapolis as you can. Because it's an election year, and now you have to make sure that the racial tensions are as divided as you can possibly get them. So, screw you to all the people out there who started floating this around, because, yeah, this was disgusting on 2 levels. And that's going to be it for the day. So we will be back here tomorrow with more contemporary. I'm going to go and grab some breakfast, get ready for work, and get ready to get this long show processed and out there to you people. Thanks everybody for coming by. We will see you tomorrow. Until then, I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary.